Hello everyone, it's Mark here and welcome back to Jewellery Maker Academy. And in today's project in tutorial, I'm going to be introducing you to the wonderful world of SuperDuo bezeling. Not just ordinary SuperDuo bezeling, but I'm going to be showing you how to SuperDuo bezel around one of my favourite pressed glass beads, the backed Rivoli. And as you can see on the screen here, we've got beautiful designs and I'm going to teach you step by step how to make your basic mandala. And then right at the very end in the final chapter, I'm going to be showing you a range of different designs and how to add your little flourishes to them. It's a great little project. It'll probably take you about an hour from start to finish, so it's not too time consuming. And what I have on my mat is everything you're going to need to complete these incredible masterpieces. So first of all, most important is the bead mat, because we don't want your seed beads rolling around. So bead mat, then needles. I don't normally specify a size needle when we're doing these type of projects, but for this, because we're going to be doing multiple passes through your 11/0 seed beads, you will need to use a size 12, whether that's a Beadsmith or a Tulip needle, but you'll definitely need a size 12. Then you'll need beading thread, either a wildfire or a fireline. I'm using this beautiful wildfire in a silver grey for this particular design I'm going to show you. Sharp pair of scissors, and then you're also going to need clasps of your choice to finish off your design if you're going to make them into a bracelet or a necklace, so either a toggle or a bolt ring or a lobster claw, even magnetic if you'd prefer that. And then on the right hand side of my mat here, I've got everything you're going to need bead-wise to make your mandala. So first of all, and most importantly, you're going to need your Rivolis. Now for the design I'm going to show you today, you will need 14mm diameter Rivolis. And we've got amazing colours. We've got purples, pinks, greens, blues, whatever you feel as though you're going to use against your beads. Then you're going to need 3 sizes of your bead. Your SuperDuo, and in the next chapter I'm going to give you a quick walk through everything you need to know about the SuperDuo. So you'll need SuperDuos and then 2 sizes of Miyuki, an 11/0 and also an 8/0. And the only other thing you're going to need is a 4mm gemstone. Now, for my design I'm going to show you today, I'm going to be using a shell pearl, of which is perfect because it's very lightweight. And once you've added all of the SuperDuos and the Rivolis, it'll be quite a heavy statement piece. So I would recommend going for a shell pearl, but any other 4mm gemstone you would like to use, feel free. So that's everything you're going to need to complete your beaded mandala. So in the next chapter, I'm firstly going to introduce you to the SuperDuo and also how to bezel set with the SuperDuos your incredible Rivolis. So follow me to chapter 2. Right, let's get started. In this first chapter, I'm going to introduce you to my #1 all-time favourite pressed glass bead, and that is the SuperDuo. And it's absolutely perfect for bezeling of your Rivolis. So this is your SuperDuo, and it has many nicknames. Some people know it as ET. Some people know them as little picky snouts. Otherwise, people think that they look similar to a little barn owl. But in effect, they are an oval bead of pressed glass that has been squidged in 2 directions. If I just turn it up sideways, you can see that each of the 2 ends have been slightly pinched and they have a drill hole in 2 places through either end. And for doing this sort of design, so this is what I'm going to show you from start to finish, you get the most spectacular results. And for bezeling around your Rivoli, which we've got in this central section here, it is absolutely perfect. Now, as I mentioned to you in the previous chapter, you will need a 14mm Rivoli for the design I'm going to show you today. If you'd like to use a larger or a smaller Rivoli, all you'll have to do is drop or add the number of SuperDuos and beads that you'll need to complete your design. But for today's project, we're going to be concentrating on your 14mm Rivoli. So there's one important thing that I definitely recommend you do, and it sounds quite laborious, but it is definitely well worth it. I would recommend, before you start any project using the SuperDuos, is just to go through at the beginning, empty the whole tube onto your mat and just check that none of the holes are blocked. Because if you get halfway through your design and you come across a blocked side of the bead, you may have to start all over again if you can't get your needle in. So it'll only take 5–10 minutes, and just go through and just double check that all of your drill holes are nice and clear. Now, Beadsmith, who produce these amazing beads, are very good at quality control, so you shouldn't have any issues, but there's always one or two that get through the net, and as I said, they will cause immense problems. Now, I've been through and I've checked all these already, so we're ready to go. So I've gone for this beautiful colour range. I've gone for this incredible turquoise Rivoli. I've gone for white Ceylon 11/0 seed beads, this incredible turquoise SuperDuo. I've gone for cream 4mm shell pearl, and this beautiful dark bottle green silver lined 8/0, which we'll be using later on in the design. But in this chapter, we'll need to use our Rivoli, our SuperDuos, and our 11/0 seed beads. We don't need to use any of the other beads until a future chapter. So the first thing we're going to do, we've checked all of our SuperDuos, have the holes nicely unblocked, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up 12 of our SuperDuos with an 11/0 in between. So we're just going to count our SuperDuos and our 11/0s. Now, you will need quite a long piece of thread for this. I've taken a piece about 8 feet long because we do quite a few rounds around the mandala, and we'd hate to have to add thread as we're going along. So make sure you start with a long piece of thread, and I'm using a size 12 Tulip needle, which is my favourite go-to needles. So we're just going to fill our needle with 12 11/0s and 12 SuperDuos alternating. So how many have we got so far? So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. And whatever we start with at the beginning of our row, i.e. SuperDuo, we need to end with an 11/0. So we're going to slide those down, and we're going to leave a tail of about 10 centimetres just to bring everything nice and neatly together. So we're going to pull with a single knot, followed by another single knot, putting that nice and securely, nice and tight. So we have our initial round. At this point, it's very similar to a little sunflower pattern. So at this point, just double check that you've got your 12 SuperDuos, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and we've got in between our 11/0s. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to sew away from the knot. So I'm going to sew through an 11/0 and the interior hole of a SuperDuo. Because we've got the two holes, we've used the interior holes already with the 11/0s, so we want to now use the exterior holes. So I'm going to sew through the next interior hole of the next SuperDuo, and we're going to do what's called a step up. So I'm exiting the interior hole. All I'm going to do is take the needle across to the exterior and sew through. And again, pull your thread nice and tight. Now, I like to work away from myself when I'm beading, so I'm just going to flip my work over, so I'm sewing away. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut off the tail for demonstration, but I would definitely recommend leaving that on until the very end. So what we're going to do next is we're going to pick up another 12 of our SuperDuos. So for the bead bezeling part, you'll need 36 altogether. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill the gaps in between the SuperDuos with more SuperDuos. So it's a nice little task to do. All we're going to do is just pull our SuperDuos through. Don't worry at this point if there are any gaps showing, because everything will come together right at the very end. There's no 11/0s in this section, it's purely SuperDuos filling up the gaps. And this is one of the reasons I love SuperDuos, because for floral designs, they work beautifully. So you can see already we're getting that sort of sunflower pattern. So we're just going to sew through. Pull this through. So I said you need 36, 3 rows of 12 altogether. So we're just going to turn our work. So I'm right-handed, so I hold my work in my left hand and I sew with my right. So pull that through. Now I'm using one colour SuperDuo for this particular mandala, but there's nothing stopping you doing an ombre pattern, maybe going a darker colour on the inside, working to a lighter through the middle, and then back to a dark colour on the outer edge if you want to. Just have a little play, and you can see how beautifully they tessellate, which is another reason I love SuperDuos. So this is your last SuperDuo, and what we're going to do is we need to do one more round of our SuperDuo. So I'm going to sew through the exterior hole of the next SuperDuo. I'm going to sew through the interior hole of the next, which will be the first one we added of this round. So I'm going to pull that nice and tight. Okay, so you can now see that we've got 2 rows. And what we're going to do, you can see that we're coming out of the interior hole of the last SuperDuo. I'm going to do another step up, so I'm going to take my needle across to the outside and back through. So we're now at the outer edge of our second row. So you can already see how quickly it builds up. I like to work away from me, so I'm now going to flip it over. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a 3rd row of SuperDuos. So it's quite repetitive. And as I said, I'm not pulling too tight. I'm going to hold the mandala in situ before we reveal around the Rivoli. So again, we're going to go around the outside edge, and you will see some gaps forming now because obviously the circumference of the circle is getting bigger and we're using the same number of beads, so you will see the thread, but that will all disappear when we come to bezel the Rivoli in the final stage, which is the exciting section. So don't be worried about being too neat or pulling your tension very tight at this point. We're simply going to fill in all the gaps with our 3rd row, and this will total 36 SuperDuos altogether. So again, we're going to go round, filling in the gaps. So as you can see now, this is really important, because if one of these SuperDuos had a blocked hole, when we come to cinch everything together at the end and we had a blockage, we'd have to reverse and unpick some of our work, and it can be a pain. So it's definitely well worth spending just that 5 or 10 minutes emptying the whole contents of the tube out. And I definitely recommend that for all multiple hold beads. Just double check. So just a couple more left. So we're going to sew all the way through. So 2 left. 2 and 1. So this is our final SuperDuo. So I'm going to talk you through it again. So we're going to go through the exterior hole, then through the interior of the next, because once again we need to get to that outside edge. So we're going to pull our needle through, flip it over, and then can you see if I pull nice and tight now, can you see it starts to cinch nice and neatly up together, okay? So just bear that in mind, that's what we're going to be doing at the end. So what we're going to do next is we're exiting the interior hole. So we're going to step up to the exterior. And as we did in the first round, we're going to fill the gaps now, which are quite big, with 11/0 seed beads, just 1 in each. So we're going to pick our work up, and it will want to fight, it will want to fight you, it will want to cinch up, that doesn't matter. So we're going to pick up an 11/0. And we're going to fill all the gaps around the outside edge with 11/0. And it says it looks really odd because you've got huge gaps and you're filling with a small little 11/0 seed bead, but don't worry. As I said, this is where the magic happens, the best bit. So we're just going to keep going all around the outside edge, and just be careful that you don't miss a SuperDuo as you're doing this final stage. All the way around, all the way around. So you can see it's starting to cinch together to form a little cup. And this will be your bezel for your Rivoli. So we're just going to continue all the way around, filling in this little gap. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using a 14mm, and I've worked out the numbers for you. If you decide that you want a smaller or a larger Rivoli bezeled, then you'll either have to take off a couple of SuperDuos or add, because Rivolis tend to go up in denominations of 2mm. So for every millimetre that you detract or add 1 more SuperDuo. So it's always going to be an even number, which is a good thing. And I've practiced most of the sizes of the Rivolis, and it tends to be that combination. So this is our final 11-0 added. So we'll just pull that through. There we go. So that's our final little cup. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of thread showing all the way around, but don't be worried about that. So just make sure we haven't got a tangle. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to slowly give a little wiggle and a pull of the thread. And there'll be a point here. Can you see if I turn that sideways? You can see now that we've got that beauty. It looks like a very romantic tractor tyre, I always think. Very romantic. And what we're going to do then is we're going to take our Rivoli before we pull too tight, and we're going to drop it in like so. So that sits nice and neatly in the top. And then we can pull our thread nice and tight, and you can see now that that beautiful Rivoli is held now within, there's the back, it's held within that beautiful bezel. So what we're going to do next is I'm just going to take my needle and I'm just going to sew all the way around once. Holding on, I'm going to use my thumb just to support the threading. I'm just going to sew once all the way around through the exterior holes of the SuperDuos and the 11-0s of the last row we just added. And just pull, give little tugs to the thread, and all of that thread that's visible will disappear. Just going to go around a few more. Holding that nice and securely. And there we have the perfect SuperDuo bezeled Rivoli. So I think we've just got a couple more moves to do. There we go, perfect. So I've gone all the way around the top of our Rivoli. That's what the side looks like. So you can see we've got beautifully aligned SuperDuos all the way around. And that's the back, and you can plainly see it's dead in the center. So we know that we've got the perfect amount of SuperDuos and seed beads to fit that beautifully. So the next chapter I'm going to show you is, you can see that we've got a definite front to the Rivoli and we have a definite back to the Rivoli. So what we're going to do is we're going to give a front embellish and we're going to give a back embellish. So if I bring this up to you now, you can see just at the point where we are at the moment. So it's quite hard to believe that I'm going to show you how to do all of this within the next 45 minutes, but it's going to be beautiful. So what we're going to concentrate on next is we're going to embellish the front of the Rivoli, and then in the following chapter we're going to show you how to embellish the back, and then we're going to show you how to complete your piece of jewellery. So thank you for joining me on this amazing Rivoli setting, and for the next chapter I'm going to show you quickly how we embellish the front. Welcome back everyone. Now we're all really excited because we've now bezeled our Rivoli with the incredible SuperDuo. So now the fun begins and we can let our imagination go wild and we can start to embellish and produce our incredible mandala. So this is our little bezel, our little Rivoli that we've just recently bezeled. And for this stage, we will be using SuperDuos later on. So I'm just going to pop those to one side. And what we're going to do now is concentrate on the front of our mandala. And for that, we're solely going to be using the 11-0s that we use to do our seed bead bezeling with. So we need to get to the right place to start our embellishing. So we've just gone round and we've strengthened the interior circle around the Rivoli here. And what we want to do is we want to get to the interior hole of the first row of our SuperDuos. So we need to take our needle on a thread journey, and it's a term that us beaders use quite often. So we need to get to the exterior hole of the first row. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle through the next 11-0, and this is where it's really important that we use a size 12 needle, as I mentioned in the introduction. So we're going to pull the thread through, and all I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to do a step up. So I'm exiting the 11-0 and I'm just going to take my needle across to the hole of the SuperDuo and I'm going to sew through. So you can see where I'm exiting from the 11-0 I'm going to go across and up through the exterior of the SuperDuo. So what we're going to do now is we're going to be using number 3 quite a bit from now on throughout the whole design. So what we're going to do is going to pick up 3 11-Os, and all we're going to do is jump over the next SuperDuo, which is the middle row, and sew into the exterior of the next. And we're going to do that all the way around. So we're going to pick up 3 of our 11-Os. We're going to jump over the middle SuperDuo row and sew into the next SuperDuo on the inside round. So then when we pull, can you see it makes a little triangle of your 11-Os? So we're going to do that all the way around. So 12 times altogether. So 1, 2, 3, jump the middle into the next, and just give that needle a little wiggle. Pull the thread through, and again we've got our little triangle of seed beads of 11-Os. So next group of 3, jump the gap over the middle SuperDuo into the next. Just give it a little wiggle to make it nice, fit nice and in place. So again, 1, 2, 3. And as I said, I'm staying with the same colour of 11-O throughout, but this is when you can start experimenting and incorporating a bit of gold or a bit of silver if you wanted to. But I just wanted for the demonstration to keep it nice and simple with the colourway that I've decided to use. I'm going to go around to the next. So it's always going to be 3. 1, 2, 3. As I said, the initial mandala design will start exactly the same way with the bezeling of the Rivoli. What happens then, it's all up to you and your imagination and how exuberant you want to be with your designs. But this is a really nice basic way of starting, and I'm really looking forward to showing you from start to finish. And then right at the very end, in the last chapter, we'll look at a few pieces of jewellery that I've made using these techniques and different ways of elaborating on your overall design. So we've just got a couple left. Again, just give it a little bit of a pull of the thread, and those 11-Os will sit beautifully in place. And then we'll pick up 1, 2, 3. Again, jump over into the next. Give it a wiggle through. Now I'm using a Tulip needle, which is very, very strong, but very, very bouncy. So you can see that I give it a lot of wiggle and it remains its shape. So I definitely recommend a Tulip needle if your budget will allow. And this is our last and final section. So I'm just going to give it a wiggle through again. Pull the thread through. And there we have our front embellished. Now if you wanted to, you could fill the gaps from point to point, but because of the overall design, I just wanted the front to stand out. If I turn it sideways, you can see now that the back is the elaborate bit. That's going to sit on the neckline nice and flat, or on the back of an earring. So I didn't want to elaborate the front, which would then cover up the design on the back. So I wanted to keep the front really nice and simple. So before we move on to the next chapter and we elaborate on the back, we need to get down to the back. So can you see I'm exiting the SuperDuo just on the back here. So again, we're going to do a thread journey to get down to the middle row. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to sew through the exterior hole of that middle row. And I've gone for a seed bead thread colour that will disappear within. So you can see now I'm in this SuperDuo. Then we're going to sew through to get onto the inside. Pull that through, like so. And then we're in the right position then, because I want to go that direction. And you can see that we're now going to be going from this interior hole of that middle row of SuperDuos instead of the exterior. Okay, so if I turn the back over, you can see now that the back, the interior row will be completely clear, which is what we want, and then all of the work will be on the middle row. Okay, so I'm going to set up all of the beads I'm going to need to do the back of the embellishments, and hope you can come along and grab a cup of tea and join me, and I'll show you how to do the front of your beautiful mandala design. Welcome back. Now the fun really does begin. We've embellished the front of our beautiful bezeled Rivoli, and now we can let our imaginations go wild and concentrate on our beautiful design of the back, which forms the actual shape of the mandala design. So as well as my 11 O's that we used to do the bead bezeling, we're bringing back our SuperDuos for part of the design, and also we're going to be incorporating our 4mm shell pearl and our 8O seed beads. And as we mentioned in the earlier chapter, I've colour coordinated everything to fit in beautifully with this particular design. So this is what we're going to be producing. It's very elaborate, but very, very simple. And because we've included 12 of these little triangles of 11 O's around the front of the design, everything we're going to do now, apart from the SuperDuo and the shell pearl embellishment, which is going to be the final round, we're going to be doing in groups of 12. So let's get started. So at the end of the previous chapter, we did a little thread journey, and we're now in the right position to start doing our mandala back pattern. So as we did with the front, we're going to be jumping over the gap to gap to gap of the middle row. We're not going to be touching the front row. Now we're just going to leave that nice and plain. So we're going to repeat what we did just here. So we're going to pick up groups of 3 11 O's. And what we're going to do is just jump the gap now. It's pretty easy to see from gap to gap. So we're just going to pull the first one. I'll just show you what that looks like. So you can now see we've got this little, it's more curvaceous because we're going on the interior SuperDuo side, not the exterior. So picking up 1, 2, 3. And from this point now, as soon as we've got these groups of 3 beads in position, that's where we can start really going to town with our embellishing. So 1, 2, 3. And what I definitely recommend if you're making a lot of these for a statement necklace or a big piece of jewellery, is every time you do a stage, just take a quick photograph on your phone. And then if you do forget where you are at any point, you can look back at your photographs and get back on track again. It's something that I do as a guest designer on Jewellery Maker, and it's been very, very helpful in the past. Because as you can imagine, being on the show 4 or 5 times a month, we make a lot of jewellery, and it's always a good idea just to make a record of your designs. Make sure that's sitting perfectly. There we go. So you can see it's starting to build up. So again, pick up 3. So there's lots of jumping involved in this design, but it all sits beautifully well. So as I mentioned, I've worked out all the numbers for you for this particular design. If you want to go smaller or larger, you'll just need to adapt the number of beads. But it's all about practice and trial and error. And that's the whole point of jewellery designing. There will be mistakes, and it's how you rectify them and move on is the sign of a true guest designer for Jewellery Maker. So we're just going to continue all the way around until we've made up our 12 little groups. And this is probably going to be the trickiest part of the design, because if you've pulled your thread too tight in the start with your bezeling of your Rivoli, you may find that some of your beads sit quite tight, but I've got the right tautness for the thread, and I don't seem to be having any problems at all. So you can see we've got 2 left to do. 1, 2, 3. Going to jump the gap, pull the thread through. As I said, I tend to hold my work in my thumb and middle finger on my hand, and that just gives you a nice stability when you're doing your beading. So this is the final group of 3. Perfect. And at this point you can see that they alternate, the front row and the back row. Can you see they don't sit on top of each other. They're absolutely perfectly in alternate. So when we come to do the next flourish of the design, you'll see that from the back right through to the front. So we know we're on the right stage. And as we used the tractor wheel analogy earlier, now I'm going to be even more romantic and say it looks like a jammy dodger, doesn't it? It's absolutely beautiful. Now, at any point in these designs, you can stop. If you're happy with that, we've got our embellishment back and front. You can simply tie off and make more, make a pendant or matching earrings or a long line bracelet, but we're just going to add. So the joy of mandala making is you can just add and add and add and add and keep going, and it's just deciding when to stop. So we're going to add our next row now. So I'm at the base of this SuperDuo, and we're going to do what's called a step up, as we mentioned earlier, and I'm going to sew up through 2 of the first group of 3 CBs that we made. So we're going to bring this up to the top. So we're at the point now to add our next row. So if we look back here, these are our little triangles of beads. So the next row we're going to add is going to be an 11-0, an 8-0 and 11-0, and we're going to be jumping through the gaps from point to point. So we can start introducing a bit more colour. So from the exit point, again, we're going to do everything 12 times. So 11, 8, 11. Going to jump the gap from the middle of this group of 3 into the middle group of 3 of the next. That's it, and you can see that fits absolutely perfectly. So 11, 8 and 11. Jump the gap. And what's lovely about making these projects for you from start to finish is once you've seen the first introduction with the ingredients that you need to make the mandala and you have everything laid out, you can actually work along with me and we can make it together, which is even more precious. Jump the gap into the next. You can see that's starting to fill the gaps really nicely. So 11, 8, 11, that's not going to change, it's always going to be that 3 seed bead combination. 11, 8, 11, jump the gap into the next, pull that through. There we go. Starting to build up quite quickly now. 11, 8, 11, jump the gap, bring our thread through. So you can already see, looking from front to back, how it's starting to overlap, and we can see more of the design coming through. So I'm just going to straighten my thread. It's all well and good using a long piece of thread, but you just need to be aware of tangles. But we're doing okay so far. So back to an 11, an 8 and an 11. Jump the gap into the point of the next. Pull our thread through. 11, 8 and 11. Jump the gap. Eleven, 8, 11. And as I said, after every single round that you've made on your mandala, you can stop, which is the joy of this particular type of design, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to shortchange, we want to make something very dramatic. So when you come to the end, just be wary that this is the group of 3 here. So you don't want to sew through this 11-0, which is the first of the group of 3. You want to sew through the middle of that next group, like we've done here. And then we'll pull that through. And there you have your outer edge. And if we flip it over, you can see now we've got that definite exterior outside pattern on the outside. So what are we going to do next? So what we're going to do, we're going to see where we're exiting from. So I'm coming out of there. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew through. Let's bring our design so I can show you where we are at this point. So this is our next group. So we've got the 11, we've got the 8, and we've got the 11. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do this little section here, which again is a little triangle of beads, but this time we're going to pick up 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to find our thread journey, and we're going to sew through the next group of beads until we exit the 11-0 just before the next 8-0. And now what we're going to do is just make sure you don't get your thread tangled at this point. There we go. Is we're going to pick up 5 of our 11-0s. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to sew down into the next. So if I pull that through, you can now see that we get this beautiful little turret around the outside edge. So we're going to sew through into the next 11. As I said, from now on you do everything 12 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over the top, pull that through, and just give it a bit of a pull. There we go. So don't be worried at this point that it's misshapen, because we are going to add another round where it will pull everything together. So don't be perturbed at this point. Okay, so we're just going to make sure we've not got our thread tangled. Perfect. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to jump over the 8-0, and I go into the inverted triangle of that group of 3 11-0s, and it just builds strength and rigidity to the exterior of your mandala pattern. We go up through, and then we pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the reason that we've picked up 5 is because every time you do a round, the exterior, the circumference of your mandala gets larger and larger, and you have to compensate with the number of beads. If we decided to go for 3, there would be gapping, there would be spacing, so just be wary of that when you come to do your design. The exterior, the circumference will get larger every round you add, so you just need to compensate for that. I'm going to pull that through ever so gently. A bit of a tangle forming there. Just pull that through. Perfect. Just straighten up my thread. Definitely recommend doing that every couple of moves, just rubbing your thread through your fingers just to deter any tangles from forming, especially because you're using a large length of thread. So go up through the 11-0 before the 8-0, pick up 5, jump over into the next 3 11-0s, so we get our other little turret, and then sew up through the 11-0 before the 8. There we go. So you can see now we've got these little turrets. They're all different size at the moment, but they will straighten out when we come to add the next round. So don't worry. So our next 5. Again, if you pull your thread through slowly, that will also evade any knots from forming. Pull that through. There we go. Okay, so you can see how quickly it's starting to build up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think half of the fun for me coming up with this design was going through my enormous bead stash at home and colour coordinating all of my gemstones, along with my CBs, with my Rivolis. And that's part of the fun, I think. 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the final chapter, when I show you the other designs you can do using this technique, we'll show you all the other colourways that I've come up with. And then through the next, so we're going to sew up through, pull our thread. So we've got 3 more to go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Jump over the 8, through the next 3 11s, including the one before the 8, pick up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, jump over the 8, sew through the next group of 3 11s, through the 11 just before the 8, pull that through, and then our final group of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we jump over and through the 11 O's. Pull that through. Okay, so that's what it'll look like at this particular stage. So again, you can stop there. It's a beautiful little flower, and then from the front looking down, it really starts to look beautiful. I'm really pleased with this. So we're coming to the penultimate row now, and this is really fast, this one. So if you wanted to, we could fill all of the gaps around the outside edge with SuperDuos, but I wanted to alternate. So the first thing we're going to do is find out where we're exiting. So I'd like to pull, so we're exiting that direction. So I'm going to flip my work over. I like to work away from me. And do you remember we added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want to take our needle and we want to sew up through bead number 3 of the group of 5, so the middle of the 11 O's. So we're going to do another step up. So every round we complete, we do a step up to get us in the right position to start the next round. So we're just going to do a little bit of wiggling through. And again, it's still quite fluid at this point, so we can get our needle. There we go. So we're going to, that's through 1. So we're just going to sew up. So we exit through that middle point. So we're exiting bead number 3 of the 5 that we've just added. And then we need to fill the gaps in between. So we're going to pick up our SuperDuos and our shell pearl and our 8 O's. So we're going to be using lots of everything in this particular round. So first of all, we're going to start, let's start with the SuperDuos. So I'm going to pick up this time 3 SuperDuos, nothing else, just the 3 SuperDuos, and I'm going to jump the gap into the next middle of that group of 5. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, this is where all of your little sections will start to look the same. So you can see that the 3 SuperDuos fit beautifully in that middle section. Now for the next section, we're going to alternate. So I'm going to pick up an 8 O, one of our beautiful shell pearls, and an 8 O. So this is where we're going to add something different. So you've got your group of 5, we're going to sew into the middle one. And then we're going to pull that through nice and slowly. And you can see again, that fits beautifully in the next gap. So we're going to alternate. So we're back to our SuperDuos. So 1, 2, 3. We're going to jump the gap, 1, 2, 3. I'll just need a bit of manipulation to have that one popping out. There we go. Pull that through and your SuperDuos will sit beautifully. And again, we're going to be adding another row shortly, so don't worry if they feel as though they're moving from back to front. Next round is an 8, a shell pearl 4mm and an 8 O, and then we're going to jump the gap into the next point. Then we're back to our SuperDuos. So 1, 2, 3. We're going to jump the gap into the middle point of the next group. Pull those through. And you see it starts to fit and it becomes more sturdy as we're going round. So an 8 O, a shell pearl, and an 8 O. As I said, I've used shell pearl, but you can use any size, any 4mm gemstone of your choice. Again, you can colour coordinate, you can bring in tones, all sorts of, as I said, this is where your imagination can really take over and you can make them unique to you. So we're going to jump the gap into the next, bringing in those lovely SuperDuos, then an 8, a shell, and an 8. sometimes you can see that there isn't a distinct middle point, so just count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're just going to count 1, 2, and then just take the needle into that middle of that group of 5, tease it out to the outside edge. There we go. And then that will fill that gap beautifully, and then it fits into place. So 1, 2, 3 super duos, jump the gap into the next, and then we're going to do our penultimate pearl section. So 1, 2, 3, jump the gap. So see this penultimate round, it does build up quite quickly. 1, 2, 3, jump the gap. There we go. So that's our final group of super duos, and then we're going to add our final shell pearl section. 2, 3, and then we're going to sew into, again, we're going to sew into the middle of that group. And then if I flip it over, you can now see it all starting to take shape. And again, you can stop at that point, but what would upset me is the fact that the super duos were free form. We need to stabilize those. So the final round is very, very quick. What we're going to do is we need to get to the outside edge again. We don't want to just jump from this 11-0 to the outside of that super duo. We need to do the thread journey. So I'm going to sew through the first super duo, like so, and then I'm going to step up to the middle, the exterior hole of that next super duo, like so. So now we're in the right place, and all we're going to do is we're not going to do anything in the gaps which have got the shell pearl. All we're going to do is pop an 11-0 through all of the super duos. So I'm going to pull that through, and then I'm going to take an 11-0 down through the 8-0. I'm going to sew through the 8, through the shell pearl, through the 8, and not only does this get into the position that you need to do your next 11-0 additions, it also strengthens the perimeter around the outside edge. So we're going to fill the gaps. So you're exiting the 8-0, pick up an 11, sew into the exterior super duo. Now we're going to fill the 2 gaps with an 11-0. Oops. Pull that through. You can strengthen your thread. There we go. There we go. On the right side, flip that over again. And then we're going to just keep going around the outside edge, filling with your 11-0s. So 11 into the next super duo, pull that through, and then an 11-0 down into your 8, through the shell pearl, through the next 8. And then you can see what that does. It's brought all of this together and it's kept it nice and strengthened and structured around the outside. So we'll just keep doing that until we get to the outside. So 11-0 up to the super duo. Then we'll fill the 2 gaps. I thought about filling these gaps with an 8-0, but there's just not enough room. It was too bulky and they were protruding quite a bit. So, and I think because we had 11-0s on the interior, it's nice to finish off the exterior with the 11-0s as well. So I'm just going to continue filling in the gaps with the 11-0s through the shell pearl and through the 8. So again, that's given it some strength. Then we're going to go back up to the next super duo group, pull that through into the next super duo, into the super duo. And I hope you begin to understand why the super duo is my #1 bead of choice. And a few years ago, I was lucky enough to be invited to look around at some of the bead houses in the Czech Republic. And I was absolutely delighted to be invited and had had a tour around the SuperDuo factory. So I've seen the procedures making these beads firsthand, and it's quite astounding the workmanship that's involved with producing your glass beads. So I have every respect for every bead that I work with. So we're going to sew down into the 8/0 through the shell, through the 8, and pull those through. And I can already feel the strength and the rigidity in that outside exterior edge, which is what we want, because we need it to sit nice and flat when we're wearing it, whether it's on the wrist or on the neckline or in an earring. These would be very gorgeous, elaborate earrings, wouldn't they? Pull that through. So you can already see now that it's starting to sit nice and flat and beautifully symmetrical all the way around. So a few more little sections to do, and then I'll show you how we complete and finish off our piece. So pick up an 8. Let me just straighten my thread. There we go. Let me just sew through, and then this is our last 11/0. So I'm just going to sew through the 11, through the 11, and I want to exit through the 11/0 directly after the SuperDuo. So I'm going to pull that through nice and tight. So just make sure we've all complete. I'm going to lay that down flat. Make sure we've got all 11/0s filling all the gaps all the way around the outside. And at this point, if you wanted to, you could do another little triangle of seed beads around the 8/0, the shell pearl, and then send off another little floret all the way around. But I think I just wanted to show you in this project that at this stage it's a really good place to stop, or you can really elaborate. So to finish off our thread, what we're going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to sew underneath and in between the 11/0 and the 8/0. I'm going to pull the thread, not all the way, I'm going to leave it until it gets to a loop about the size of a grape. And you can either take the needle down through the loop or up through the loop. I take my needle down once, and I take my needle down twice, and then I pull nice and tight, and that knot will sit nice and neatly in between our seed beads, and then we'll sew away from the knot. If you wanted to, you could go all the way around to strengthen it even further, but I just tend to go through just a couple of inches of beading, and then it's perfectly safe to cut your thread away. So we'll get our sharp pair of scissors and we'll just cut our thread away. So there we have the mandala that we've just made, and this is the mandala that I made at home as my test piece. So as you can see, they're absolutely identical. And remember when we were talking about adding our groups of 5 that some of them looked a bit misshapen? You can now see that they're all absolutely perfect little turrets all the way around your mandala design. And if you wanted to, you can join together to make a bracelet. We've already mentioned you've got your earrings, or we could make a beautiful necklace. Now in the final chapter, I'm going to give you some inspiration of some more of my designs using different variations. But in the penultimate chapter, if you come along and join me, I'm going to show you how we can turn this lovely mandala into a necklace. Right, the penultimate chapter, we've now made our beautiful mandala, and now I'm going to quickly show you how we turn it into a beautiful statement necklace. And then in the final chapter, I'll give you a bit more inspiration with some other pieces that I've made using this incredible technique. So we've made our mandala. Now we take a new piece of thread onto our needle. Now you won't need very much, only a couple of feet. And your clasp of choice. So I'm going to be using this beautiful sterling silver toggle for mine. So for my necklace, I won't be using any more SuperDuos because they have 2 drill holes and I want to keep it really simple. But I am going to incorporate the seed beads and the shell pearl that I've used, so keep those to one side as well. So what I tend to do is I take my needle and I go to one end and I attach the first half of my clasp. So this is how I generally make my necklaces when I'm at home. And I tie a single knot followed by a double knot, otherwise known as a surgeon's knot, and then another. So a single followed by 2 doubles, like so. And leave the tail till the very end because we need to tie that off. So once we've got our toggle, we can then come up with a combination of beads for our necklace. So I am going to, on my design, I'm going to pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11 O's, then an 8, then a shell pearl, then another 8, and then another 5, 11 O's. So it's entirely up to you, the combination of beads that you decide to go for your particular necklace. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat this combination, sort my thread out, all the way along until I'm happy with the length of my necklace. So an 8, a pearl, an 8, and it's just continuing the combination. Now, depending on how long you want your necklace to be, when I'm doing this type of necklace, I tend to do between 18 and 24 inches. But because it's a statement piece, you may want it to be longer, so it turns into a navel length piece, for example. Again, it's all down to personal preference and how you want to wear your jewellery that you've made. So we're just going to add another 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so we'll continue our necklace, our first half of our necklace, until we're happy with the length. So either 8, 9, 10, 11 inches, however long you decide. So just continue with that. Then we're going to bring in our mandala. And the first decision we need to make is how we want it to sit. Whether we want it to sit point up or points up. That's the big decision. So if we wanted to do it point up, I would take my needle and I would sew through the 11O, a SuperDuo, and an 11O at one of the points. So when I bring this down, you will see that it will sit like so. And then you would continue a mirror image to do the other side of your necklace. If you wanted to do on the flat side, so I'm just going to reverse through my seed beading, pull that back through, and you wanted to have it on the flat with the 2 points, so more of the hexagonal point rather than point to point. I tend to use it point to point, but again, all depends on how you want your piece to sit. I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to sew through the 8O, the shell pearl, and the 8O, and pull that through, so you can see that it looks completely different. And then again, you would continue with your combination. So you'd pick up your 5 11Os, and then your exact same combination. So you want it to be a mirror image of your first side of your design. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Pull that down. So even though you're going through the same combination of beads, you get that different outlook of how you want your particular necklace to sit. So you would continue with this. Let's do a few more and then I'll show you how we finish off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we do our little embellishment. Pop on our little shell pearl, and then our 8O, and then we'll do a few more, 3, 4, 5, and then again our embellished combination. And then whatever you started your design with, you end with your design. So it's going to be the 5 seed beads. So we're going to slide that down. So imagine that we've replicated that with the full length of our piece of work. I'm going to cut my thread, and then I'm going to pop on the second half of my clasp that I've chosen. I'm going to make a single knot, and then I'm going to take the side of the toggle, and I'm just going to slide it down ever so gently until it meets your seed beads at the other end. And then to tie the knots this time, I'm going to take my thread back up through the loop once, And then that little loop that we've made, I'm going to feed my thread through twice, like so, to pull that nice and tight. And then to make it really secure, I'm going to flip my toggle over 180 degrees. And then I'm going to tie exactly the same double knot. But this time the knot will be forming on the back of the toggle, not the front, as we did the first time. So I'm going to bring through once and twice, pulling that nice and tight. So we've completed our necklace, we've added our clasp, but we still got our two ends. And the way we deal with those is I don't like cutting the thread where I've made the knot. So I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to rethread my needle, and then all we're going to do is we're going to take the needle and we're going to sew away from the knot, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to sew through the first 11. I'm just going to sew down through a couple of inches, probably needle length, and you can see where the needle is exiting. I'm going to pull that through nice and neatly. You may need to use a pair of pliers just to pull that needle through. I'll just quickly do that. Pull that needle through, and then just make sure it's nice and secure, and you'll see the knot disappear into that final F11OC bead there. You'd slide off your needle, and then you'd be safe to then cut your thread, knowing that your knot is nice and secure around your clasp, but we've cut the thread down through the necklace. And then you'd repeat that the other end with your T-bar of your clasp of choice. And if we have a quick look, this will be the back of your design with that beautiful structured back of the Rivoli in the back. You can see all these amazing little flower petals irradiating from the front, but then when we flip it over, you can see that we've got our necklace ready to wear, we've got our frontal embellishment, and we've also got our back embellishment. So that is your SuperDuo bezel set Rivoli from start to finish. There's only one thing left for us to do, and that is I'm going to bring some across some of my pieces that give you a bit of inspiration and just show the different levels and rounds that you can add to your pieces. Before we say goodbye, I thought I would just give you a quick bit of inspiration and show you some more designs using that incredible Rivoli bezel set tutorial that I've just shown you using the incredible SuperDuos. And here in front of me I have 5 pieces, all completely different. As you can see, they all start with that same initial bezel setting. So I thought I'd first of all show you a completely different way of using your Rivoli, and I've made an incredible seed bead ring. So this is the seed bead bezel tutorial that we've shared together, and all I've done extra, as you can see on the back here, is we started our little triangles on the front, which I showed you in the demo. Then we showed you the triangles on the back, and then all I've done, just to add a little flourish, is I've made some little right-angled weave picots emanating from the middle of the group of 3 11O seed beads along the back there, all the way around. So it's like a little lion's mane of beads all the way around, and that's all I've done. And then to make it into a ring, I've made 2 rows of simple seed beading to make a butterfly back ring shank. So if we put that on the ring there, you can see how beautiful it looks as a ring. That Rivoli is really shown off in its full. So that's number 1. Then number 2, I've made a necklace. And what I've done with this one is we've got our 2 rows of SuperDuos at the front and our SuperDuo at the back that we discussed in the tutorial. And then all I've done is we've got our group of 3 little 11Os that we did in the tutorial. And then on the back, we've got group of 5, but in a different way. Instead of having a group of 3, let me show you from the back, that might be easier. Instead of having a group of 3 on the back, we've got a group of 5. And then in between the groups of 5, I've added an 11O and a 4mm green shell pearl. And that's all I did to complete this design all the way around. So instead of having groups of 3 at the back, as we had at the front, we've got groups of 5, which just gives more of a point to our petals at the back, and then we've added on our seed beads around the outside, and then I've added a simple necklace chain as I showed you in the previous chapter. So that's the second one. Now this one is exactly the tutorial that we've just worked on together, but at this time I've used purples. So we've got this amazing purple Rivoli in the center. We've got our SuperDuos. Here are our little triple hat using our little 11Os around the outside. And then if I flip it over, you can see it's exactly the same, but in a purple colorway other than a turquoise as we did in the tutorial. And again, this time what I've done, because I wanted it to emanate from the point, is I've just done a little triangle of 5 11Os protruding from a middle SuperDuo, and that's how I've attached my necklace, finished in exactly the same way. I've even used the same toggle on this one as well. So that's your, let me bring it over actually. This is the turquoise we've just made, and that's your purple version. So exactly the same. How different they look, absolutely spectacular. Then we've got two, we're getting a bit more elaborate now. So this one here is more of a pointed structure. And what I've done, we got to the same stage. We've got our groups of 2 SuperDuos, not 3. And then when I've gone round to finish off the final round, I've popped the 3rd SuperDuo in between the last 2. So if I bring my piece that we made in the tutorial across, you can see that we've got a group of 3 turquoise here. And this time I've added 2, and I've inserted the 3rd in between the 2 11Os. And then all I've done then is I've just gone round the outside, all the way around, filling in with an 11O surround to just give it more structure. So in effect, it's the same style, same coloration, but you can just see how different it looks and more elaborate, and how darker using those beautiful peacock shell pearl looks. It just gives it a completely different look. But again, if I turn it over so you can see the back, again, all revolving from that basic similar start we did with the Rivolis. And then the final one, I really went to town with this one. And this is a pink version with this beautiful cerise pink interior. So we've got our front row, we've got our middle row in between the 2, and then that's our back row. And you can see this time I wanted something a bit different. So this is the back. This is our group of 3 11Os that we did in the tutorial. And then what I've done is in between, I've added 2 SuperDuos all the way around. So this one will use more SuperDuos. And then at the front, we've got our little triangle of 3 11Os around the outside. Then I added little picots of right angle weave. And then I popped in an 8O all the way around just to give that an extra thrill. And then on the back, can you see I've incorporated more of our 8Os. So I've got an 8O right angle weave picot in between our groups of 2, which will then draw the SuperDuos in together so you get a point all the way around. And then I've just elaborated with another SuperDuo interspersed in between the picots. And then I've incorporated the shell pearl around the outside. And as you can see, sometimes you just don't know when to stop. And I gave in, I relented, but there was nothing stopping me adding another row around the pearls and then adding another row of SuperDuos. But as I said, the difficult part is knowing when to stop. And with this particular, you can actually pop it open. Can you see? So you get this beautiful frill around the outside. So when you place that down, you get this beautiful 3-dimensional look all the way around. But just as I said, just have a little play and let your imagination go wild and see what designs you can come up with. But the point of today's tutorial was just to get you used to using SuperDuos to create these beautiful bezel set Rivolis. And then once you've got that in place, just from adding your little groups of 3 CBs, you can really start to elaborate and build up your incredible designs. So thank you ever so much for joining me and spending the time producing this piece of jewellery from start to finish. Make sure you look back on our JM Academy website just to check all the new tutorials that are coming through thick and fast at the moment. And I really do hope that if you have SuperDuo sat at home in your stash and you have the odd Rivoli, then you'll be able to produce some of these incredible pieces. So all that's left is to me to thank you so much for joining me, spending the past hour with me. I hope you loved the tutorial, hope you give it a go, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care.